And I am Eric Kripke, and the show is still Revolution.
J.J., have you stopped slowing down doing things, and what can we expect from Revolution?
Have I stopped slowing down?
Yeah.
So that means
Yes.
you're still
Speed
going
up.
fast,
Wait a
right?
minute. I need at least 3 negatives. We are, well, we can talk about Revolution. In terms of slowing down, I think that the second half of this first season, what you'll find is that it speeds up quite a bit. I think one of the great things about having this break between the first and second half of the first year is it gave the show and those behind it a chance to kind of stop and get a lay of the land and kind of look at what was done and realize that some of the stories might have happened a little bit slower than they should have, that some of the revelations didn't come as fast and furious as they might. And because the second half is about building to a real and significant conflict where the revolution really begins, I think that the first half of the year was very much about finding Danny. Now that will be resolved, and it will move on to something that I think is pretty awesome and pretty compelling.
How tough is it to build character and build story points when we're living in a time when people just don't have patience for that anymore? They want to make it move. Do you play to that, or do you do it in your own form and say, here's what you get?
Do you want to take that?
Sure. Obviously it's a balancing act, and any show, Revolution is no exception, lives or dies based on the strengths of the characters, and so you have to find ways to make them complicated and make them human and ground them, and in my opinion, focusing on the characters is more important than the mythology or the concept. It comes first and foremost because storylines come and go, but I think people watch television because they love the characters. And so that's always my priority as we're launching a season. But you also need, some really big, compelling, exciting moments early too. It's a little bit of like you need that spoonful of sugar, so people will latch in and give themselves over to you. And if you give them 1 or 2 amazing moments when it starts, and I think again the blackout notion, which came from J.J. and his partner Brian, and you launch it in such a compelling way that the audience hops on for the ride and gives you a little bit of patience that you can start evolving characters and making the transition to a show that could go for years.
J.J., at what point did you recognize that there was a storyteller living within your being?
I, as a kid, because I was so abysmal at sports, spent a lot of my time drawing and making little Super 8 movies and things like that. And so I remember before I could write, and there's some who would say I'm still there. I remember drawing pictures of a play I wanted to put on, and so I was always interested in theatrics, and I was always interested in story and character. And it really was when I started watching The Twilight Zone when I was a boy that I had that feeling of I want to do that, not really knowing what that entailed, and so writing during elementary school and junior high, high school, college, it was just something I always did as a way of making movies and telling stories, and it was something I always liked. I didn't necessarily know that I would ever use writing to get to a place where I could direct, but I always knew that I wanted to direct movies.
Is the experience modified over the years? I mean, is the experience of writing different now than as a child?
It's a funny question because on the one hand, it's exactly the same. There is very little difference ever, and in fact, I remember when I first sold something, that feeling of, oh, I am now in the Writers Guild. And I realized, oh, I'm exactly the same schmuck that I was yesterday. I still have exactly the same, limits. I still have the limited sort of repertoire of what I know how to do at all, and so there really is never that threshold you cross, I don't think, where you go from being someone who is an aspiring writer to being a writer, at least from the inside out. And so I feel it's exactly the same. Having said that, the one thing I've found, much to my chagrin, is that every time I've written something, and to be clear, it's Eric who wrote Revolution. But every time I've written something, I don't know how I ever wrote anything, and it actually is harder the next time. And you'd think it would get easier. You'd think, oh, come on, you know how to do it. The truth is, every single time I feel like, oh my God, this is actually, for some reason, more difficult, as opposed to it being somehow simpler.
JJ, how do you divide your time? I mean, it'd be one thing if you were working on, a little indie film and a major TV project, but you're working on a huge film franchise and a huge television project, and granted you have Eric here to...
Yeah, to be clear, my role in Revolution was to say yes to a very talented writer and showrunner. So when Eric came in and pitched this idea, and yes, we had a couple of thoughts that helped, but that's what we're trying to do, is just help get the vision on screen. The show is run by Eric. He's the one in the writer's room. He's the executive producer of the series, making sure that the story is being told. And so, again, if you're casting a movie and you cast a great actor, you don't have to ride that person and puppeteer them. You let them elevate the material and take you places. And yes, you give direction, but they're the ones who are doing it. When you are working with someone starting a business, whether it's a TV show or a company, a restaurant, you want to work with people who not only you trust and who are good at what they do and have great work ethic, but are people who are going to elevate the opportunity. In this moment, when Eric came in and pitched the show, it was, I can't believe we get to work with him. Why is he even pitching this to us? Why isn't he just doing it? I don't understand why he's even, So it was not like, it was sort of a no-brainer to want to be part of this thing. Not just because the idea was cool, but because the pedigree of the person who was creating it.
Well,
JJ,
thanks,
you're like a huge industry on your own, and you built it from they say if you say you built it, you did it. It was everybody else, but you actually built this yourself. So I'm curious as to what sort of your own personal philosophy in terms of environmental stuff that you made sure that regardless of it, whether it was a very small production or some gargantuan trillion-dollar movie, what did you want to keep and not forego?
You mean in terms of
in terms of your environmental philosophy,
the environment, meaning like
green stuff?
yes. Well, I will say that when I first started working in the business, with the exception of having a recycle bin, there wasn't much of a green movement. And that's changed over time. So, for example, on movies like Star Trek, we made sure that we were using generators that were, green generators. We made sure that it was a very conscious choice to make sure that in the production we were doing things that were the smart choices. Kind of like with all of us every day, you have to make your own smart choices. It's why I drive a hybrid car. It's it's that kind of stuff. But having said that, I feel like it's interesting how it went from it not being on the map really, or something that was even really considered, to now it's sort of just in the fabric of what we do all the time every day. And I know that, the productions that I've been lucky enough to work on, and I would completely argue with you about your statement that I built anything on my own. I know, and we all know that never happens, but the truth is that I work with people who, like with my family, we care desperately about the environment, and every step we make, every choice we make, we try to make choices that are good and smart and responsible.
Since you brought up Star Trek, quick little progress report, something.
We're editing. We're getting through it, and hopefully, we'll have a locked cut sooner than later.
And
It has to happen before May because it comes out in May. So if our cut's not done then, we are screwed.
So you're
I'm
working
afraid our
24/7.
time is up.
I wouldn't say 24/7.
Thank you,
I'd say,
guys.
16/5.
23/6.
And guys, thank you so much.
Anything about Mission Impossible? Next Mission Impossible we can talk
We're
about?
working on that as well.
JJ, what kind of car do
Okay.
you have? Your hybrid, what is it?
I have a Ford Fusion hybrid,
Okay.
which I enjoy enormously.
That's a